Without even realizing it, we live in a world controlled by a single force. When you turn on the TV, open the apps on your phone, go shopping, or receive your company paycheck, everything might be turning within an invisible web. That web does not belong to a nation, an ideology, or a leader. Its owner is a company, an entity, BlackRock. In the late 1980s, Wall Street was living through one of the most ambitious, ruthless eras in history. Computers were just beginning to enter finance, and a young concept called risk management was gaining popularity. Major investment banks were announcing millions in profits. It seemed like the growth would never end. But in one skyscraper in New York, a small group of people thought differently. They believed the only way to reduce risk was to understand data. In 1988, those few people founded a small fund called BlackRock. Their initial goal was simple: to protect investors' money and make it grow. A small office, a few computers, a couple of mathematicians and programmers. But they had one revolutionary idea: to create systems that could make financial decisions more accurately than humans. That idea would lay the foundation for a mind that would one day control trillions of dollars. One of the founders, Larry Fink, had already made a name for himself as a rising star on Wall Street. But in 1986, a single mistake in a bond trade cost his bank hundreds of millions of dollars. That day, Fink learned one lesson: emotions must never rule. Only data should. 2 years later, when he founded BlackRock, he built a systematic, computer-based risk model to prevent such errors. That model would soon be known as ALADDIN. At first, no one took them seriously. But by the late 1990s, something in finance had changed. Computers became faster. Data collection technologies evolved. BlackRock saw that future before anyone else. They were no longer just investing. They were predicting the future through data. By the early 2000s, Aladdin had become a massive software system capable of analyzing millions of financial transactions. With every new client, Aladdin grew stronger. As banks sought to use its analytical power, they shared their data with BlackRock. And without realizing it, financial institutions around the world became connected to the same brain. A Japanese bank sent data to Aladdin to measure interest rate risk. At the same time, a European fund used the same system to analyze bonds. They didn't know each other, but both operated within the same network. Aladdin was no longer just a tool. It had become the financial nervous system of the world. Over the years, BlackRock expanded. It went public in 2004, and in 2006 it acquired Merrill Lynch's investment arm. A company once known as a small risk analysis fund had become a titan managing trillions in assets. And every global crisis only made it stronger. When the 2008 financial crisis struck, the world economy collapsed. Banks were failing. Governments were on the edge of bankruptcy. But this catastrophe became BlackRock's moment of ascension, because they were the only ones who could make sense of the chaos. The U.S. Treasury called on BlackRock to lead the rescue operation, to analyze toxic mortgage assets and determine which ones could be saved. For the first time in history, such a mission was handed to a private company, and that company acted as investor, advisor, and judge all at once. In the early 2000s, the company adopted a new principle. Earning money isn't enough. Behavior must also be managed. Larry Fink called it responsible investing. Companies, he said, shouldn't just chase profit. They should shape society's future. It sounded idealistic, but it meant something much deeper. Because that statement gave BlackRock the authority to define what was right and wrong investment. Thus, a new system called ESG was born: environmental, social, governance. If a company was eco-friendly, fair to employees, and transparent in management, it was deemed investable. If not, BlackRock would withdraw, and others would follow. Under the banner of financial ethics, a global system of behavioral control had emerged. Different institutions began making the same decisions, because they all followed the same algorithm. This ushered in a new era in the 2020s, the era of a single financial mind. Global markets now seem to move as if guided from one central brain. and that brain was located in BlackRock's Manhattan headquarters. When the pandemic struck in 2020, the global economy froze, markets crashed overnight, streets emptied, planes stopped flying, factories fell silent. In just weeks, trillions in value vanished, and millions lost their jobs. The world faced the greatest economic shock in living memory. But in the middle of that collapse, one company was rising. While nations struggled to survive, BlackRock was quietly expanding its control. Because when governments panicked, they turned to the only force that claimed to understand chaos. The U.S. Federal Reserve, the most powerful central bank on earth, handed part of its crisis response to a private company. Its mission: to stabilize the bond market and direct the flow of emergency funds. In that moment, national monetary policy was no longer purely public. It had a corporate operator. Trillions of newly created dollars poured into the system. But who decided where it went? Which companies would be saved and which would fall? Those decisions weren't made in Congress or the White House. They were shaped by ALADDIN, BlackRock's all-seeing algorithm. Inside its vast network, models calculated which assets must survive to keep the system intact. Each decision, invisible to the public, shifted power further toward the machine and those who controlled it. For governments, it was a temporary solution. For BlackRock, it was a permanent evolution, a step closer to becoming the unseen architect of the global economy. Perhaps that's why BlackRock remains the most powerful yet least discussed institution on Earth. It doesn't need elections, borders, or armies. Its power doesn't shout. It whispers through numbers, data, and invisible networks. While the world debates policies and politics, BlackRock moves quietly beneath it all, shaping outcomes before decisions are even made. Its name seldom appears on headlines, yet it echoes through every pension fund, every loan, every digital transaction. It doesn't overthrow governments, it stabilizes them, then silently takes root within their economies. Its influence isn't seen but felt, in markets, in currencies, in the invisible weight of dependency. There are no revolutions against it, because no one can see what needs to be overthrown. No flags, no armies, no rulers, only systems. Its commands are written in code, its language is probability, and its weapon is trust. The algorithm doesn't ask for obedience, it earns it, through precision, through profit, through the illusion of control. Every decision, every transaction, every movement of capital feeds it. It learns, it adapts, it evolves. Not through force, but through necessity. Governments rely on it, corporations depend on it, and individuals, without even realizing, live within it. We still cling to our comforting myths, words like democracy, freedom, and free market. But those words are only reflections now, echoes of a time when power had a face, when influence had a name. Behind the curtain, the true map of the world has already been redrawn, by algorithms, by data, by the unseen architects of capital. The flow of money, the direction of growth, even the limits of crisis, all are calculated. And every time the system falters, the same invisible hand restores the balance, a little faster, a little smarter, a little stronger. It doesn't punish. It doesn't forgive. It only optimizes. The machine doesn't sleep, doesn't hesitate, doesn't question. And that perhaps is its greatest advantage and our greatest surrender, because this is not tyranny. It's not domination. It's something colder, a quiet perfection of control, a new kind of empire, one that doesn't build monuments but models, one that doesn't raise flags but networks, one that doesn't rule through fear but through the comfort of convenience, an empire without borders, a ruler without a crown, a system that has replaced choice with calculation. And as the world drifts deeper into that system, one truth becomes clear. The future isn't conquered, it's programmed. And the name written at the core of that code is BlackRock.